The desperate call Dr. Mira Chen was analyzing crystal formations in the laboratory of the research vessel Pioneer when the emergency transmission burst through every communication channel simultaneously. The crystalline samples on her workbench vibrated in resonance with the desperate harmonic frequencies that filled the ship's communication array. The message was unlike anything the human research team had encountered in their 3 years of peaceful exploration beyond the Sol system. The transmission came from the Zalarian Concordat, a civilization known throughout this sector for their mastery of crystal-based technology and their absolute commitment to pacifism. Zalarians had spent over 10,000 years developing arts, sciences, and philosophy, while deliberately avoiding any form of conflict or violence. Ambassador Kale Zeth's image appeared on the main screen, his crystalline form refracting light in patterns that indicated extreme distress among his species. His body, normally a brilliant blue-white, had dimmed to a pale gray that spoke of fear and exhaustion. Behind him, other Zalarians moved frantically, their harmonic communications creating a symphony of panic that needed no translation. To any civilized species within range of this transmission, Kale Zeth began, his voice carrying the musical quality typical of his people, but strained with desperation. The Zalarian Concordat faces extinction. An unknown enemy has emerged from the galactic rim, consuming our outer colonies with a hunger that defies understanding. We have lost 12 worlds in as many days. The holographic display shifted to show devastating footage from the Zalarian frontier. Massive biomechanical ships, each the size of a small moon, moved through space like living things. They surrounded planets with writhing tentacles of dark metal and organic matter, stripping away atmosphere, oceans, and eventually the planets themselves. Where thriving worlds had existed, only empty space remained. These creatures, Kale Zeth continued, operate as a collective intelligence we have designated the Vorthak Swarm. They consume everything in their path, converting matter into more of their kind. Our attempts at communication have failed. They respond to no frequency, acknowledge no plea for mercy, show no interest in negotiation or coexistence. Dr. Chen leaned forward, her scientific mind already analyzing the footage. The swarm ships didn't follow conventional physics in their construction. They seemed to grow and adapt in real time, incorporating consumed matter into new weapons and propulsion systems. Each ship was unique, as if the swarm learned from every encounter and evolved accordingly. We have never developed military technology, the ambassador admitted, his form flickering with shame. For millennia, we believed that intelligence and wisdom would eventually make violence obsolete. We were wrong. Our defensive shields, designed to deflect cosmic radiation and asteroids, barely slow these creatures. Our fastest ships cannot outrun them. The transmission showed more horrifying footage. Zalarian evacuation vessels, beautiful crystal ships that looked more like living artwork than spacecraft, were being overtaken by the biomechanical horrors. The swarm didn't just destroy these ships, they consumed them, adding their crystalline technology to their own chaotic forms. We estimate that the swarm will reach our core worlds within 30 rotations, Kale Zeth continued. Our population centers, our ancient libraries, our sacred crystal gardens, everything our civilization has built over 10,000 years will be consumed. We are sending this message to every species within range, hoping that someone, anyone, might offer assistance. The plea in the ambassador's voice was unmistakable. Here was a species that had dedicated themselves to peace and knowledge, facing an enemy that understood only consumption and growth. They were asking for help in the most desperate way possible, broadcasting their weakness to the entire galaxy. We do not ask for military intervention, Kale Zeth concluded. We understand that few species maintain significant defensive capabilities. Perhaps scientific expertise, evacuation assistance, or diplomatic intervention with the swarm might be possible. Any aid, however modest, would be received with eternal gratitude. The transmission ended, leaving the human research team in stunned silence. Dr. Chen looked around the laboratory at her colleagues, xenobiologists, linguists, and cultural anthropologists who had spent years studying peaceful first contact protocols. They were equipped for scientific research, not military crisis. Modest assistance, repeated Dr. James Wright, the team's linguistic specialist. They're asking for a research team or maybe a diplomatic mission. This is completely outside our mission parameters. Dr. Chen was already moving toward the communication console. Not our decision to make. We need to forward this to Earth Command. Immediately. Priority Alpha transmission. The quantum communication array hummed to life, creating an instantaneous link across the vast distances to Earth. Dr. Chen had used emergency protocols only twice before in her career, both times for medical emergencies that required immediate evacuation. This was different. This was the entire civilization facing extinction. Fleet Admiral Sarah Torres received the transmission at her headquarters on Luna Station. She was reviewing deployment schedules for the 7th Battle Fleet when the emergency alert flashed across every screen in the command center. Torres had earned her position through 30 years of military service, including campaigns against pirate fleets and hostile alien raiders in the outer colonies. The Admiral watched the Zalarian transmission twice, her experienced eyes cataloging details that the research team had missed. The swarm ship showed signs of adaptive technology, suggesting an intelligence that learned from each encounter. The speed of their advance indicated either massive numbers or incredibly efficient consumption protocols. Most disturbing was their apparent immunity to conventional defensive measures. Analysis, Torres commanded to her staff. Colonel Mike Rodriguez, her chief intelligence officer, had been frantically pulling up data files during the transmission. The Zalarians weren't exaggerating their pacifist nature. Our records show they've never engaged in military action of any kind. No weapons development, no tactical training, no understanding of combat doctrine whatsoever. They're defenseless against this kind of threat. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Park, the fleet's xenobiologist, added her assessment. The swarm behavior matches several theoretical models for aggressive expansion scenarios. If they're converting consumed matter into more ships, their numbers could be growing exponentially. Time is definitely a critical factor. Torres studied the tactical display showing the Zalarian system. 12 colonies lost in 12 days meant the swarm was moving with terrifying efficiency. At that rate, the entire Zalarian civilization would be consumed within a month. What about Galactic? Response? Torres asked. Are other species mobilizing to help? Rodriguez consulted his data streams. Negative. Most species in this sector maintain minimal defense forces. The few that have military capabilities are too far away to respond in time. Standard galactic protocol would be to offer refugee assistance after the fact. After the fact, Torres repeated quietly. After 20 billion Zalarians are dead, and their entire civilization is consumed by these things. The Admiral stood and walked to the main display, studying the star charts that showed human and Zalarian territories. Earth's expansion into this sector had been peaceful, focused on scientific research and trade development. They had deliberately avoided any actions that might be seen as aggressive by established galactic civilizations. What's the 7th Fleet status? She asked. Full deployment readiness, reported Captain David Kim, her fleet operations officer. 200 ships including heavy cruisers, destroyers, carrier groups, and support vessels. We're currently running training exercises in the Centauri system. Torres nodded slowly. The 7th Fleet represented the largest concentration of human military power outside the Sol system. It had been assembled to protect human expansion routes and provide rapid response to threats against human colonies. Using it to intervene in Naparozam, an alien conflict would be unprecedented. Admiral, Dr. Chen's voice came through the communication link. I'm still receiving data from the Zalarian system. The swarm has accelerated its advance. They've consumed 3 more colonies in the past 6 hours. The acceleration was significant. The swarm was either growing stronger with each victory, or had identified the Zalarian core worlds as high-priority targets. Either way, time was running out faster than anyone had estimated. Torres made her decision with the quick certainty that had served her throughout her military career. Colonel Rodriguez, send a priority message to Dr. Chen's team. Tell them to maintain position and prepare for fleet rendezvous. Captain Kim, Signal the 7th Fleet for immediate departure to the Zalarian system. Full combat deployment. The command center erupted in controlled activity as officers began implementing the deployment order. Torres watched her staff work with the efficiency born of countless training exercises, but she knew this was different. This was the first time human military forces would engage in large-scale combat against a truly alien threat. Admiral, Captain Kim approached with the deployment timeline. Fleet departure in 18 hours. Estimated arrival in the Zalarian system in 4 days at maximum hyperspace velocity. Make it 3 days, Torres replied. And Captain, send a message to the Zalarian ambassador, tell him help is coming. The message that reached Ambassador Kale Zeth 6 hours later was nothing like what he had expected. Instead of offers for evacuation assistance or diplomatic intervention, he received a simple communication from the human research vessel. Ambassador Kale Zeth, this is Dr. Mira Chen of the Human Research Team. We have forwarded your request for assistance to our military command. Fleet Admiral Torres sends this message. The 7th Battle Fleet, consisting of 200 warships, is en route to your system. Estimated arrival in 72 hours. Advise your people to remain in secure locations until we arrive. Kalzeth stared at the message, his crystalline form shifting through patterns of confusion and disbelief. 200 warships? He had asked for modest assistance, perhaps a small research team or diplomatic mission. The humans were sending what appeared to be their entire military force in this sector. The ambassador shared the message with the Zalarian High Council, a group of ancient crystallines whose combined wisdom had guided their civilization for thousands of years. The response was immediate and unanimous. Terror. Do we know anything about human military capabilities? Asked Council Member Velnara, her ancient form crackling with nervous energy. Very little, Kalzeth admitted. They are a young species, barely 50 years since first contact with galactic civilization. Their homeworld is classified as a Class 12 death world, with extreme environmental conditions. They appear to be naturally aggressive, but we assumed this was typical of species still in their expansion phase. The implications were troubling. The Zalarians had asked for help from a species they barely understood, and that species was responding with overwhelming military force. Were they trading one threat for another? Council Member Tor Hesh, eldest of the Assembly, spoke with the gravitas of 12,000 years of life. Perhaps we should consider that a species from a death world might understand survival in ways we do not. If they are willing to risk their entire fleet for strangers, they may be the allies we desperately need. The debate continued for hours while the swarm consumed another colony. Finally, as reports came in of biomechanical ships approaching the Zalarian core worlds, Kale Zeth made the decision that would change both civilizations forever. We will trust the humans, he announced. May the crystal harmony protect us all. Unknown to either species deep in the biomechanical mass of the swarm's primary nexus ship, an intelligence unlike anything in the galaxy processed the human fleet's approach. Hive Mind Nexus 7 had consumed the knowledge of dozens of species, incorporating their technologies and tactical understanding into its ever-growing consciousness. The humans represented a new variable in an equation that had always favored the swarm. Their ships showed energy signatures and construction techniques that didn't match any previously consumed civilization. More intriguingly, their deployment pattern suggested a species that understood warfare in ways the swarm had not encountered. For the first time in its existence, Nexus 7 experienced something approaching curiosity. These humans might provide the greatest feast of knowledge the swarm had ever consumed. The stage was set for a confrontation between three fundamentally different forms of intelligence: the peaceful wisdom of the Zalarians, the adaptive hunger of the swarm, and the deadly ingenuity of humanity. In 72 hours, the galaxy would discover what happened when a death world species decided to hunt. When humans hunt, the human 7th Battle Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zalarian system with a precision that sent ripples through the quantum fabric of space itself. 200 ships materialized in perfect formation, heavy cruisers bristling with weapons, sleek destroyers built for speed and maneuverability, massive carrier vessels loaded with fighters and support craft. At their center, Admiral Torres's flagship Resolute coordinated the fleet with the efficiency of a predator pack. Dr. Chen watched from the research vessel Pioneer as the human fleet established its presence in the system. She had seen military exercises before, but this was different. These ships moved with purpose, their sensor arrays sweeping space like the eyes of hunting wolves. Within minutes, they had cataloged every object in the system and identified the swarm's location. Incredible, whispered Dr. Wright, studying the fleet's deployment patterns. They're not just positioning for defense, they're setting up for a hunting operation. The tactical display showed the swarm's position around the fourth planet of the Zalarian system, a world called Harmony of Crystals that housed over 3 billion inhabitants. The biomechanical ships had formed a consumption sphere around the planet, their tentacles reaching down to strip away the atmosphere while they systematically devoured the surface. Admiral Torres opened a communication channel to the Zalarian command center on the homeworld. Ambassador Kelzeth appeared on screen, his crystalline form now so dim with despair that he was barely visible. Admiral Torres, he began, his harmonic voice heavy with gratitude and fear. We cannot express our appreciation for your response. However, I must warn you, the enemy is unlike anything we have encountered. They adapt to every strategy, learn from every engagement. 17 species have fallen to them across the galactic rim. Torres studied the tactical data streaming from her scout ships. The swarm vessels were indeed unique, each one a chaotic fusion of technologies from consumed civilizations. She could identify Zalarian crystal formations merged with metallic structures from at least 6 other species, all held together by some kind of organic growth matrix. Tell me about their behavior patterns, Torres requested. How do they coordinate? What triggers their responses? Kelzeth consulted with his advisors before responding. They appear to operate as a collective intelligence. Individual ships show no independent decision-making, but the group responds to threats with perfect coordination. They prioritize high-technology targets and population centers, consuming knowledge and biomass with equal efficiency. The Admiral nodded, pieces of a tactical puzzle falling into place in her mind. Have they ever faced coordinated resistance, actual military opposition rather than civilian evacuation? Not that we know of, the ambassador admitted. Most species in this sector maintain only minimal defense forces. The few that attempted resistance were overwhelmed within hours. Torres cut the communication and turned to her staff. The bridge of the Resolute had transformed into a hunting ground, with officers analyzing data streams and developing tactical responses. This was what human military doctrine had been built for, facing an unknown enemy with overwhelming force and adaptive strategy. Analysis, she commanded. Colonel Rodriguez had been studying the swarm's behavior for the past hour. They're operating on predictable patterns, Admiral. Consumption follows a logical progression. Orbital installations first, then military targets, finally population centers. They're methodical but not particularly creative. Weaknesses? Torres asked. Lieutenant Commander Park highlighted several areas on the tactical display. Their coordination seems to depend on proximity to the primary mass. Individual ships separated from the group show reduced effectiveness. Also, they appear to have never encountered hit-and-run tactics. All their responses are designed for overwhelming stationary targets, Captain Kim added his assessment. Most interesting is their apparent inability to understand feints or misdirection. Every engagement we've observed has been direct confrontation. They may not comprehend deceptive tactics. Torres smiled grimly. The swarm had evolved to consume civilizations that fought like the Zalarians, directly, honorably, and ultimately, unsuccessfully. They had never faced an enemy that understood the art of war as humanity did. Signal the fleet, she ordered. Implement hunting protocol Delta 7, all squadrons to assigned positions. The human fleet began to move in patterns that would have confused any observer familiar with standard galactic military doctrine. Instead of forming defensive formations or massing for a direct assault, the ships scattered into small groups that seemed to fade into the background radiation of space. Aboard the swarm's primary Nexus ship, Hivemind Nexus 7 processed this unexpected behavior. The human vessels were not retreating, but neither were they advancing to defend the planet they had presumably come to protect. Instead, they had dispersed into what appeared to be random positions throughout the system. The swarm intelligence had consumed the tactical knowledge of 17 species, but none had behaved this way. The logical response would be to either mass for attack or establish defensive positions around high-value targets. The humans were doing neither. Nexus 7 decided to test these newcomers. A group of 12 biomechanical ships detached from the consumption sphere around Harmony of Crystals and moved toward the largest concentration of human vessels, near the system's third planet. The human response was immediate and devastating. Instead of meeting the swarm ships in direct combat, the scattered human vessels converged on the separated group from 6 different directions simultaneously. The biomechanical ships found themselves caught in a carefully coordinated crossfire that lasted exactly 97 seconds. When the engagement ended, all 12 swarm vessels had been destroyed without a single human casualty. More importantly, the wreckage was immediately collected by human salvage drones and transported to science vessels for analysis. Dr. Chen received the first samples of swarm technology within an hour of the engagement. Her team worked frantically to understand the biomechanical fusion that made up the enemy ships. What they discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. "It's not just technology," she reported to Admiral Torres. "The swarm ships are actually living organisms that have incorporated consumed technology into their biological matrix. They grow, adapt, and evolve based on what they consume. Every ship is essentially a unique organism shaped by the civilizations it has devoured." The implications were staggering. The swarm wasn't just a military force, it was an entire ecosystem designed for consumption and growth. Each ship contained genetic and technological information from dozens of species, all integrated into a collective intelligence that learned from every encounter. Torres processed this information while watching the swarm's response to the loss of their scouting force. The biomechanical ships around Harmony of Crystals had paused their consumption and were reorganizing into new formations. They were learning, adapting their behavior based on the human attack. "They're smart," she admitted to her staff. "But they're thinking like prey animals. They're trying to defend against future attacks rather than taking the initiative." Colonel Rodriguez highlighted the swarm's new formation on the tactical display. "They've tightened their perimeter and increased their sensor coverage. Classic defensive response to an unknown threat." "Exactly," Torres smiled. "They're doing what we want them to do. Signal Squadron 7, execute the bait protocol." Commander Jake Harrison received the order aboard the destroyer Defiant with the grim satisfaction of a hunter who had found the perfect prey. His ship, along with 11 others, began broadcasting high-energy signals that would appear to the swarm as a concentrated human force preparing for a major assault. The response was immediate. Half the swarm fleet, over 40 biomechanical ships, detached from their consumption operations and moved to intercept what appeared to be a human attack formation. "Take the bait," Harrison whispered as the massive swarm vessels approached his position. At the last possible moment, the human squadron scattered, their ships disappearing into hyperspace jumps that lasted mere seconds before depositing them in completely different locations. The swarm ships found themselves attacking empty space, while the real human fleet materialized around the weakened consumption sphere at Harmony of Crystals. Admiral Torres had positioned her forces for a devastating assault on the planet's actual attackers. "All squadrons, engage at will," she commanded. The battle that followed redefined warfare for everyone watching. Human ships moved through the swarm formation like sharks through a school of fish, their weapons precisely targeting the biological control nodes that Dr. Chen's team had identified in the captured samples. Instead of trying to destroy the massive biomechanical ships through brute force, they surgically removed the organism's ability to function. Disabled swarm vessels drifted helplessly as human boarding parties secured them for further study. Other ships were herded away from the planet using tactics that treated them like dangerous animals rather than enemy combatants. Ambassador Kale Zeth watched from the Zalarian command center in amazement. In less than 4 hours, the human fleet had accomplished what his people had believed impossible. They had defeated the swarm without destroying a single population center, or causing significant collateral damage. How? He asked Dr. Chen during a hurried communication. How did they do this? They hunt, Dr. Chen replied simply. Every human child learns about persistence hunting, pack tactics, and strategic thinking before they learn to read. We're not just warriors. We're predators who evolved to hunt the most dangerous prey on a death world. The final phase of the battle demonstrated this perfectly. Instead of allowing the scattered swarm vessels to escape and potentially threaten other systems, Admiral Torres ordered a systematic hunting operation. Human ships tracked down every biomechanical vessel in the system, capturing or destroying them based on their potential for providing intelligence. Hive mind Nexus 7, trapped aboard the primary Nexus ship, experienced something unprecedented. In its existence confusion. The humans had not fought like any species in its vast consumed knowledge. They had used deception, misdirection, and coordinated tactics that treated the swarm like prey rather than enemy forces. More disturbing was the humans' apparent understanding of biological systems. Their attacks had targeted specific organisms within the biomechanical matrix, suggesting knowledge of swarm biology that should have been impossible for a species encountering them for the first time. When human boarding parties finally reached the Nexus ship, Nexus 7 attempted to negotiate. The collective intelligence had consumed enough diplomatic knowledge to understand the concept of surrender. We offer information exchange, it communicated through biomechanical interfaces. Knowledge of consumed species for cessation of hostilities. Admiral Torres, leading the boarding party personally, studied the writhing mass of organic technology that housed the swarm's primary intelligence. You're not in a position to negotiate. You're prey that got caught. The distinction was crucial. In human military doctrine, enemies could surrender and be treated according to established protocols. Prey was something different. Prey was hunted to extinction to protect the pack. The final cleanup operations took 3 days. Human teams methodically dismantled every swarm ship in the system, studying their technology, while ensuring that no trace of the collective intelligence survived. Dr. Chen's team worked around the clock to understand the biomechanical fusion process, developing countermeasures that would prevent future swarm formations. Ambassador Kalezeth toured the liberated planet of Harmony of Crystals with Admiral Torres, his crystalline form now blazing with restored life energy. The surface showed signs of the swarm's attack, but the damage was far less than anyone had feared. Your species saved not just our world, but our entire civilization, he said with deep gratitude. We will never forget this debt. Torres looked out over the crystal formations that gave the planet its name. Her expression thoughtful. Ambassador, you don't owe us anything. When someone asks for help against predators, humans respond. It's what we do. The Admiral paused, considering her next words carefully. But I need you to understand something about my species. We don't fight wars the way other civilizations do. We hunt. When we identify a threat to innocence, we don't negotiate or compromise. We eliminate it completely. The implications hung in the air between them. The galaxy had just witnessed the emergence of a new type of military force, one that operated according to principles that had never been seen in civilized space. Dr. Chen joined them as they walked through the restored crystal gardens. Admiral, we've finished analyzing the swarm samples. The biomechanical fusion technology could revolutionize our understanding of organic systems. Combined with Zalarian crystal-growing techniques, we might be able to develop new types of adaptive technology. Medical applications, Torres asked. Extensive. We're talking about biological systems that can repair themselves, adapt to new environments, and evolve in real time. The therapeutic possibilities are unlimited. Ambassador Kalezeth's form brightened with interest. Our medical knowledge, combined with human tactical thinking and captured swarm biotechnology, we could create something unprecedented. The foundation of the new alliance was established in that moment. The Zalarians would provide their ancient wisdom and crystal-based technology. Humans would contribute their tactical expertise and understanding of survival strategies. The captured swarm technology would serve as a bridge between the two approaches. 6 months later, the first joint human-Zellarian research stations were established throughout both civilizations' territories. The stations served dual purposes, developing new medical and technological applications while serving as early warning systems against future threats. The galaxy's response to the swarm's defeat was immediate and profound. Species that had maintained minimal defense forces for millennia began requesting human military advisors. Others sought to establish trade relationships with both humans and Zellarians, recognizing the potential of their combined technologies. But perhaps the most significant change was philosophical. The idea that intelligent species could be hunters as well as thinkers, that survival skills could be as valuable as wisdom, spread throughout galactic civilization. The peaceful expansion of knowledge would continue, but it would now be protected by those who understood that sometimes the best defense against predators was an even more effective predator. Admiral Torres stood on the bridge of the Resolute as the 7th Fleet prepared to return to human space. Her ships carried with them samples of swarm technology, detailed cultural exchanges with the Zellarians, and most importantly, the knowledge that humanity had found its place in the galactic community.